Brandon Lee's fatal gunshot. On March 31st, 1993, Brandon Lee, son of martial arts legend Bruce Lee, was shot and killed on the set of The Crow in what became one of Hollywood's most devastating on-set tragedies. Lee, 28 years old, was filming a scene at Kuroko Studios in Wilmington, North Carolina, where his character was supposed to be shot by a gang member. The production had been plagued by accidents and delays. Budget constraints had led to cost-cutting measures, including the use of improperly managed prop guns. For a previous scene, the crew needed close-up shots of a revolver with bullets visible in the chamber. Unable to obtain proper dummy rounds, they created their own by removing the gunpowder from live cartridges. However, they failed to remove the primers. When these makeshift dummy rounds were fired in the earlier scene, the primer ignited, lodging a bullet fragment in the gun's barrel. No one checked the weapon afterward. Days later, the same gun was loaded with blank cartridges for the scene where Lee's character would be shot. A blank cartridge contains gunpowder, but no bullet, designed to create a realistic muzzle flash and sound. What the crew didn't know was that the barrel still contained the lodged bullet fragment. That Wednesday evening, Lee walked through the door of the set carrying groceries as scripted. Actor Michael Massey, playing the gang member, pulled the trigger from approximately 15 feet away. The blank's explosive force propelled the lodged bullet out of the barrel at lethal velocity. The projectile struck Lee in the abdomen, tearing through his body and lodging near his spine. Lee staggered backward and collapsed. Initially, the crew thought he was acting. It was a death scene after all, but when the director called cut and Lee didn't move, they realized something was catastrophically wrong. He was rushed to New Hanover Regional Medical Center, where surgeons operated for 5 hours trying to save his life. He never regained consciousness. Brandon Lee was pronounced dead at 1:04 p.m. on April 1st, 1993, after 12 hours of emergency surgery. The medical examiner ruled it an accident. The investigation revealed a devastating chain of negligence, improper prop handling, lack of safety protocols, and cost-cutting that prioritized schedule over safety. Michael Massey, who pulled the trigger, was traumatized by the incident and took a year off from acting. He never watched the completed film. The Crow was eventually completed using digital effects and a body double. It became both a commercial success and a memorial to Lee. His death led to major reforms in Hollywood firearms safety protocols, including mandatory armorers on set and strict regulations for prop weapons. To this day, many productions use only CGI muzzle flashes rather than blanks. Vic Morrow's helicopter decapitation. On July 23, 1982, actor Vic Morrow and 2 child actors were killed in a helicopter crash during the filming of Twilight Zone, the movie, in what remains the worst filming accident in American cinema history. The tragedy occurred at Indian Dunes in Valencia, California, at 2:20 in the morning during an elaborate Vietnam War sequence. Director John Landis had conceived an ambitious scene where Morrow's character would rescue 2 Vietnamese children from a village under attack. The scene required a Bell UH-1 Iroquois helicopter, multiple explosions, gunfire effects, and the actors wading through the Santa Clara River. The production had hired the 2 children, 7-year-old Micah Dinle and 6-year-old Renee Shenyi Chen, illegally, working them at night without permits, and paying them under the table to avoid child labor laws. The helicopter pilot, Dorsey Wingo, had expressed concerns about the proximity of the explosions to his aircraft. The pyrotechnics were massive, designed to create dramatic fireballs for the camera. Despite Wingo's objections, Landis insisted on the shot. The sequence was meticulously choreographed, with Morrow instructed to wade through the shallow river, carrying both children as explosions detonated around them, and the helicopter flew overhead at extremely low altitude. At 2:20 a.m., they rolled camera. The helicopter descended to approximately 25 feet above the water. Morrow grabbed the children and began moving through the river as planned. Special effects coordinator Paul Stewart triggered the explosions in sequence. The detonations were far more powerful than anticipated. One fireball erupted directly beneath the helicopter's tail rotor. The aircraft immediately lost control. It spun violently, its rotor blades still rotating at full speed. Wingo fought desperately to regain control, but the helicopter was coming down. The massive aircraft crashed into the river directly on top of Morrow and the children. The main rotor blades, spinning at hundreds of revolutions per minute, struck all 3. Vic Morrow and Micah Dinley were decapitated instantly. Renee Chen was crushed by the helicopter's wreckage. Crew members ran into the water, but there was nothing anyone could do. The entire tragedy unfolded in seconds, captured on multiple cameras that kept rolling. The bodies were recovered from the river within minutes. Police and investigators descended on the location, treating it as a crime scene. The investigation revealed systematic violations of safety regulations, child labor laws, and basic common sense. Director John Landis and 4 others were charged with involuntary manslaughter. The trial lasted nearly a year. In 1987, all defendants were acquitted, though the families of the children received multi-million-dollar settlements. The tragedy fundamentally changed Hollywood safety standards, leading to strict regulations governing stunts, pyrotechnics, child actors, and director liability. 4. Actor John Eric Hexum died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound on the set of the television series Cover Up, in what appeared to be a tragic accident born from boredom and ignorance about firearms. Hexum, a 26-year-old rising star, was filming at 20th Century Fox Studios in Los Angeles. The production was running behind schedule that Friday afternoon. Between setups, Hexum and the crew were experiencing significant downtime. They had been waiting for over an hour for the next scene to be prepared. Hexum was sitting alone at a table in his dressing area, growing increasingly restless and frustrated with the delays. A .44 Magnum revolver loaded with blanks was on the table, a prop for the upcoming scene. To pass the time and entertain himself, Hexum picked up the weapon and began playing with it. He spun the cylinder, pointed it at various objects, making jokes to himself and crew members passing by. No one thought anything of it. At approximately 5:15 p.m., in an apparent attempt at a joke or perhaps imitating Russian roulette, Hexum placed the gun loaded with a blank cartridge against his right temple and pulled the trigger. He reportedly said, "Let's see if I've got one for me," immediately before firing. The blank discharged. While blanks contain no projectile, they expel hot gases and wadding at extremely high velocity. At point-blank range against this skull, the explosive force was devastating. The blast created a small entry wound, but generated enough pressure to fracture a quarter-sized piece of Hexum's skull. The bone fragment was driven into his brain like shrapnel, causing massive hemorrhaging. Hexum slumped forward immediately, blood pouring from the wound. Crew members rushed to him, calling for emergency services. He was rushed to Beverly Hills Medical Center, where surgeons operated to relieve the pressure on his brain. But the damage was catastrophic. Hexum never regained consciousness. He was declared brain dead on October 18th, 6 days after the accident. His mother made the decision to donate his organs. His heart was transplanted into a Las Vegas businessman. His kidneys saved 2 other lives. In death, Hexum became one of the first high-profile organ donors, raising awareness about donation at a time when it was far less common. The death was ruled accidental. The investigation revealed that Hexum had no understanding of how dangerous blanks could be at close range. Many people, including actors who regularly worked with prop weapons, believed blanks were completely harmless. The tragedy led to mandatory safety briefings for all actors handling firearms on set, even props loaded with blanks. Cover Up continued production with a new lead actor, but it was canceled shortly afterward. John Eric Hexum's death remains a cautionary tale about the deadly potential of even fake weapons when mishandled. Roy Kinnear's horseback fall. On September 19, 1988, British character actor Roy Kinnear died from injuries sustained during a horse riding accident while filming The Return of the Musketeers in Toledo, Spain. Kinnear, 54 years old and an experienced comedic actor, had expressed concerns about the horse stunts required for his role as Planchet. The production was a sequel to earlier Musketeer films, and Kinnear was reprising his role. Despite being an accomplished actor, he was not a confident horseman, and had made this known to the production. The scene required him to ride across rough terrain during a chase sequence. Director Richard Lester, who had worked with Kinnear on previous films, assured him the scene would be safe. That Monday morning, the cast and crew assembled at a location outside Toledo for the riding scene. The terrain was uneven, rocky, and challenging, even for experienced riders. Kinnear mounted his horse with visible apprehension. The crew prepared to film the sequence, which involved multiple riders galloping across the landscape. Cameras rolled, The horses began moving faster across the rough ground. Kinnear's horse stumbled on the rocky terrain. He was thrown from the saddle, hitting the ground hard. The impact was severe. He landed on his pelvis, fracturing it in multiple places. Crew members rushed to Kinnear's side. He was conscious but in excruciating pain, unable to move. The production had chosen a remote location, and medical facilities were not nearby. An ambulance was called, but it took considerable time to arrive. When it finally reached the set, Kinnear was transported to a hospital in Toledo. The initial medical assessment identified the pelvic fracture, but doctors believed his condition was stable. However, during the night, Kinnear's condition deteriorated. He developed a heart attack, likely triggered by internal bleeding and shock from the injuries. He died the following day, September 20th, 1988. The production was immediately shut down. An investigation revealed that adequate safety measures had not been in place. There was no on-set medical personnel, despite the dangerous stunt work. The remote location meant emergency response was delayed by crucial minutes. Most troubling, Kinnear had specifically expressed discomfort with the horse work, yet was still required to perform the scene. Kinnear's widow, Carmel Cryan, sued the production company and eventually received a settlement. Director Richard Lester, devastated by the tragedy, retired from filmmaking shortly afterward, stating he could no longer work in an industry where such preventable deaths occurred. The Return of the Musketeers was eventually completed using a body double and editing techniques, but it was released with little fanfare out of respect for Kinnear. His death led to stricter protocols regarding stunt work, particularly for actors who express hesitation or lack experience in specific physical skills required for scenes.